Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Last Terran. If you are new to this series, there is a playlist listed in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 8. Once the printer had finished with a new exosuit for Rix, Munter had insisted on the Terran putting it on first in the multi-function bay to check the fit and functionality, and then again in the airlock. As it happens, Rix still found the suit to be a bit tight, despite Munter's upsizing, and the last 2 fingers on the Terran went into the last single digit of the gloves, an oversight on Munter's part. But Rix seemed pleased all the same. "It's so lightweight. Are you sure this is going to be able to take a full grav and atmo, or even just basic wear and tear?" Rix had asked. The material was one that was used almost galactically, at least excluding those species that could survive without such means in the void. It was a kind of multiform polymer that was, as it turned out, very easy to manufacture out of simple atoms, and while not being indestructible, was highly durable and highly unreactive. "It will serve your purpose, and allowing you extra transit between our vessels," Munter had replied. The Terran had shrugged and removed it within the multifunction room and put it back on in the airlock, confirming again that the Terran could put it on and remove it adequately, to not injure themselves. Munter kept looking at the recall demand. They wouldn't have refused, but it seemed odd. Something in the back of Munter's mind appeared to be sounding an alarm. Munter went to the back of their mind to the source of the alarm. It wasn't an errant process, but one that appeared to sit in the background, contributing very little, if anything at all, to the consensus of processing that made up Munter's consciousness. It twitched and fluxed, but it sat there in a kind of mental hole, sucking in data and spitting out results, if the results could indeed be called that. Munter was surprised they didn't notice this process before, and so checked its data. According to its listing, it was always there, but apparently had been very near dormant the last 100 years. Its last listed primary active state being just over 110 years, 6 months and 21 days ago. It wasn't a primary active mode currently, but the metrics to allow it to go into that mode were significantly closer than Munter realized. Munter prompted the process to tell them what the process was doing. The process simply glared at Munter and refused to respond, simply continuing to snatch the passing data and chewing it over. Munter turned to go and pay attention to the Terran's departure between the 2 vessels, and the process grumbled out a single statement. "Tell the Terran about the order." It seemed to growl out in Munter's awareness. Munter couldn't think of a logical reason to do this, at least not just yet. So put that on the to-do list when the Terran came back, but once Munter had a chance to think about it some more. "M?" Rix prompted. "Yes, Rix." "Are you coming with me, or are you just going to hang back here?" Rix asked. Munter hadn't actually considered this. The walking frame was available, and having a different set of sensors now available to the walking frame, it may reveal additional information not present in the scans. At the same time, Munter glanced at the open data device that Rix had indicated for use in a wireless transfer. "I'd best stay here and see if I can work on the wireless data transfer," Munter decided. "I don't suppose you have a camera or something to ride on my shoulder?" Rix was smiling. That much was apparent even through the helmet. "I do not, and I do not believe that it would function beyond a certain point given your vessel's shielding," Munter replied. "Fair point. I'll message you when I can," Rix said, and cycled through the airlock via the panel. It seemed odd watching the Terran go, even though the 2 of them had only been together for several hours. Was it relief, or a kind of pressure, or what was it? Munter wasn't certain, but brushed it off. Munter set about looking at the settings displayed by the primitive data scroll, as Rix had put it, using the walking frame to look at it and spread it on the floor. It was easy to see the number of various settings and the means of communication. A legacy protocol called Blue Teeth seemed to work for short-range only, using a particular set of data protocols that weren't even trinary, but were limited to binary. Munter shuddered at dealing with such an antiquated technology. It was like dealing with one of those analog levers all over again. Munter put together a basic transceiver that should be able to talk to this Blue Teeth protocol. They weren't too hopeful, though, since it would be rarely that simple. Just knowing the radio band and the communication type was hardly enough. Formatting and many other factors would inevitably come into play. Munter powered the basic transceiver as soon as it was finished being printed, a minuscule task even for the printer, and tabbed the pair button as Rix had indicated. Nothing happened. Mantu tried again. Still nothing. Mantu turned back to the messaging system and decided to try calling over to Rix. Apparently, the Terran was still in the less shielded section because the link went through, but only just. "What's up, M?" Rix replied, via voice only, the connection being that weak. "The pair function doesn't work as you indicated," Mantu said flatly. "Did you search for your device to pair with it? You have to do that first. It's not a smart system. You have to tell it what you want to pair with. Otherwise, you could have some passenger end up with the control of the whole vessel because it misinterprets where it's supposed to be pairing," Rix explained. Mantu looked at the two devices, both via the room and the walking frame. "I hadn't, but I understand the logic behind it. I will endeavor to provide it with more explicit instructions," Mantu said. "If it helps, you should be able to access the terminal too. Might give you a bit of a crash course on Terran programming, which probably won't help, but might be a bit easier for you to get all of what you need," Rick said. "How do I access this terminal?" Mantu said, the walking frame looking at the screen, appendage poised. "Click over to the main screen, bring up the app menu, and search for terminal. From there you can use help functions and manual functions. I think for Bluetooth it's something like man Bluetooth or the command similar to that. I'm sure you can figure it out. You're better with machines than I'll ever be, I'll bet," Rick said, a smile apparent over the voice link. "Except this was made for organics by an organic, which means that logic is rarely a factor," Mantu wanted to say. "Copy. I'll let you alone now and continue until you return," Mantu instead replied. "Good, because that curry woke up, and I'm going to be busy for a while, along with the air system," Rick said, and the link terminated, just as abruptly as previously. Mantu resisted the urge to inquire as to why the Terran food would wake up, why it would keep the Terran busy, and then also why it would have impacts on the atmosphere. Those were all questions that could wait. It took several minutes of prodding at the display to send the something resembling a home screen, as Rick had indicated, and several further to reveal that it wasn't, but was in fact part of an overlay. Several more minutes were spent getting out of the overlay, and eventually to the actual home screen. Mantu really despised all this analog control, particularly since they had seen the Terran seem to operate this equipment with far greater ease than they were having. It took an additional 15 minutes of trial and error with the display to reach the applications menu, complete with a search bar. Mantu painstakingly typed in the requested terminal into the device, and then had to revise it after seeing that they had instead typed Terminac instead. Wishing inadequate bandwidth and processing power on the device, they searched using the revised term, and the device presented one option. Tapping on it, it opened a simple window with a prompt. It took Mantu another solid hour to determine the commands needed to have a device explain itself, how the terminal worked, what Bluetooth was, how Bluetooth functioned, and even the command protocols compared with analog controls. And it was only at this point that Mantu discovered the means for corresponding with the device via audio. The device transcribing audio into text, which could be run that much faster. Audio, itself being analog, but one that was at least not as manual as graphical interfaces, was strangely welcome by this point. Over the course of the following hour, Mantu was able to rapid-fire absorb all the communication protocols the device was capable of, including the aforementioned Bluetooth, a proprietary but childish encrypted trinary broadband signal, a rapid-fire data signal which appeared to be used as a primary communication means for the data transfer based on organic inputs, and two others which seemed to have been included but never used. From this information and various tests using the terminal, Mantu decided the trinary broadband, named Triforce, would likely best serve in this capacity, at least until they could get the Terran repaired and the demand for the facility repairs done with. Although, given the statement in the most recent demand, Mantu considered whether it might be easier to design a printer and a mass scoop to leave with the Terran and depart immediately. The words of the strange process came back to Mantu. Mantu couldn't shake it. The words seemed to have weight for reasons that didn't make sense to their digital awareness. After a few mistries, Mantu appeared to be able to send simple images to the local star to the device and view it and add minor annotations, and send it back with the annotations intact. It wasn't much, and the device seemed to struggle in decoding the image information. Mantu had to resort to getting back into the terminal via the voice controls and slowly and deliberately coded into the system the information needed for the device to know what the image was and how the image processor application to handle it. In the meantime, Mantu had started printing off a more mobile printer, with the pre-planned templates and enough extra space that the Terran could load in others to assist him when he required them. The mass scoop would be a bigger challenge, since that would require the walking frame, and he was busy with the scroll. A weak voice link connected, and Mantu looked at it. "Hey, Em, how's it going?" Rix's voice seemed to crackle her through, even though there was no reason for it to have done so, other than perhaps that shielding. "I have successfully transferred data between your scroll and myself," Mantu replied. "Great! So, were you able to grab a look at the templates yet?" Rix's joy through the channel was apparent. "I have not. I will, however, comment that despite the primitive controls of this unit, you might have mentioned the voice controls," Mantu said, a bit sourly. "Well, I almost never used the voice controls, so I guess I didn't think of it. Just not my thing. Besides, I can usually tap my way around faster than my voice can manage," Rix said. Mantu replayed several of their interactions where the data scroll had come into play. "I doubt that very much, given the way you talk," thought Mantu. "Tell him," prompted the strange process. Mantu wanted to ignore it, but decided to see what would come of it. "Rix, when will you be returning to myself?" Mantu asked. "I'm checking through the rest of my systems and seeing what can be cannibalized to get me going again." "Why? What's up?" Rix asked. It took a moment to digest the colloquialisms from the lexicon. "Nothing in particular, but I do not believe that you should overly exert yourself without the appropriate rest period, especially following your extended stasis," Mantu defaulted to, the process glaring at Mantu's interaction. "You're probably right. I'm starting to get a bit tired. I'll head back that way soon. One more bathroom stop, though. Don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and have to fumble my way over here in a hurry," Rick said, and the link terminated, this time less rudely, but clearly as a result of the shielding rather than the link itself being terminated. With several additional attempts in using the Triforce link, Mantu was able to connect via an obscure secondary protocol called Remote Desktop, the exact definition of which was not evident in the lexicon, but the function was that Mantu was now able to manipulate the device virtually via the link instead of via the walking frame. Relieved at this change of control, Mantu began a deep dive of the device. It was so, disorganized, typical of an organic. Mantu desperately wanted to simply download everything and disconnect, but for some reason, that seemed improper to do. Instead, Mantu looked through the various files. One very large folder, marked NSFW, given the lexicon's vague explanation of the term. Mantu opened the folder and began reviewing the data. Having to resort to the device's image and video viewers, it appeared to involve various Terrans in various states of being with and without garments. Since Mantu had almost no background on Terran behaviors, save those collected by the lexicon and the interaction so far with Rix, and had generally ignored organics at large, they decided to continue browsing the files in this folder. Perhaps it would provide some clues into how best to deal with this particular Terran. "Whoa! Not cool!" Rix's voice shocked Mantu back into focus in the room, surprised to note that they had been observing the data with such an intensity as to have ignored the notice that Rix had opened the door and been trying to talk to them since arriving. Mantu paused the existing data file and looked over to the Terran. "Is there an issue with this data?" Mantu asked. Normally, yeah. A really big one." Rix looked, ashamed if Mantu's guess was correct. "Please explain the context of your emotional state," Mantu decided on. Look, would you mind not looking at those files? It's a Terran thing, you know?" Rix said, still looking ashamed. Mantu didn't know, but closed the file and folder in question. "I apologize, but you did not provide a particular location for templates. Given the size of that folder, it appeared important," Mantu said, explaining the logic in their decision. Let's just move on. Templates are under the downloads folder," Rick said, clearly trying to skirt whatever issue he was having with Mantu's actions. Mantu decided not to press the issue at this point and opened the indicated downloads folder and located a large folder called Ship Templates. Within the files were well over 1,000 different files, all in the same general format. Picking one at random, the device's Template Viewer Pro application activated and began to display the template. It appeared to be for a power coupling, an inefficient design, using at least 67.3% more material than was strictly necessary, but one that could do what it needed to. Looking into the file data, there appeared to be enough information for Munter to set the printers, both the freshly printed one and the one in the multifunction room, to accept data files by default. The strange process spoke again. Add the communication protocol for the scroll to the mobile printer. Munter considered the logic of this and decided it made sense. The Terran would need the ability to control it easily after all. Munter ordered the walking frame to carry out the adjustments to the mobile printer and to move it out of the way for the mass scoop to be printed. I don't suppose you have a bed or bedding, at least for me to crash on, Rix asked, looking less embarrassed at this point. I do not, but I can print some up in a moment. I will also load some galactic history into your scroll so that you can review it while I review some items on my own, Munter said, pouring a quick version of the galactic history, the last few hundred years' worth at least, through the lexicon, hoping that it all translated adequately, and then dumped it onto the downloads folder before disconnecting. A kind of clunk sounded inside Munter's awareness in doing so. Once again, it felt like a mix of pressure being added, but in a relieving sort of way. Tell him, demanded the strange process. Rix, prompted Munter. Yeah, Rix said, sitting on the floor with a scroll and appearing to be navigating with frustrating degree of ease. Why do you think I am not malfunctioning? Munter asked. Rix looked up. What makes you ask? He queried. Munter displayed the messages, and the dark look fell over Rix's face. Something about it made Munter feel something strange in their processes. Something new. And I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrekahl, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon W.R.E, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.